Number 1. The Bespin Breaking Point. Luke Skywalker's journey toward becoming a Jedi Master began with incredible promise. But it also started with a fundamental crack in his foundation. When Vader revealed their relationship on Cloud City, Luke didn't just lose a hand, he lost his emotional center. The revelation that his father was the galaxy's most feared enforcer shattered Luke's understanding of his own identity. Here's where the first critical divergence emerges. Luke received no guidance on processing this psychological trauma. In the aftermath of Bespin, Luke constructed his own lightsaber and presumably deepened his connection to the Force. But he did this largely alone. Without a master to guide him through this emotional labyrinth, Luke developed coping mechanisms that would later prove catastrophic. He learned to suppress his fear rather than acknowledge and transcend it. He buried his anger instead of understanding its roots. Had Yoda survived another year, or if Obi-Wan had been more forthcoming earlier, Luke could have learned the crucial difference between feeling darkness and acting on it. The Jedi of the Old Republic failed because they tried to eliminate emotion entirely. Luke's path could have revolutionized the Order by teaching that emotions aren't the enemy. Unexamined emotions are. Instead, Luke internalized a hybrid approach that was neither traditional Jedi detachment nor healthy emotional processing. He became a powder keg of unresolved feelings, which would later explode in Ben Solo's hut. Number 2. The incomplete education. Luke's total Jedi training spanned maybe a few weeks at most. Count it up. A few days with Obi-Wan during the journey to Alderaan, a brief but intensive period on Dagobah before rushing off to Bespin, and then a return visit to Yoda that ended with the ancient master's death. This is the equivalent of attending 2 weeks of medical school and then opening a hospital. Luke learned to lift rocks and do backflips, but he never received the institutional knowledge that made the Jedi Order function for millennia. The consequences of this abbreviated education ripple throughout Luke's later failures. He never learned the pedagogical methods that had been refined over thousands of years. He didn't understand the psychology of training Force-sensitive children, the warning signs of students susceptible to the dark side, or the structured curriculum that prevented young Jedi from being overwhelmed by their powers. According to the Rise of Kylo Ren comic series, Luke essentially improvised his teaching methodology, pulling from ancient texts without the context to properly interpret them. Had Luke discovered a Jedi holocron earlier in his journey, those teaching devices featured throughout the Clone Wars animated series that contained the wisdom of Jedi Masters across generations. He could have learned about the warning signs that led to Anakin's fall. He would have understood that attachment isn't inherently corrupting, that possessive attachment leads to darkness. He might have recognized that Ben Solo's struggles mirrored his grandfather's far earlier, when intervention could have made the difference. Time to hit that hype button. If you're loving this deep dive into Luke's missed opportunities, help us reach new Star Wars fans by using YouTube's Hype feature. Let's build this community together and explore more what-ifs from a galaxy far, far away. Number 3. The Throne Room Triumph. Luke's confrontation with Palpatine aboard the second Death Star represents both his greatest victory and his most dangerous lesson. When he threw down his lightsaber and declared himself a Jedi, like his father before him, he achieved something remarkable. He chose compassion over combat and won. He proved that love could redeem even the most fallen soul. But this moment also taught Luke a deceptive lesson: that faith and sacrifice alone could overcome darkness. The problem with this formative experience is that it worked exactly once, under extraordinarily specific circumstances. Vader still had light in him, a connection to his past self that Palpatine had never fully extinguished. Luke's refusal to fight triggered memories of Padme, of the Jedi he once was, of the goodness he'd buried under decades of pain. But Luke seems to have internalized this as a universal solution. The Last Jedi shows us a man who believed that his compassion and faith could redeem anyone, including Ben Solo. This singular success became a template that didn't account for individual circumstances. A more versatile Jedi Master would have recognized that his method worked for Vader because of their unique relationship, not because it's a one-size-fits-all solution to darkness. Ben Solo needed direct intervention, clear boundaries, and active confrontation of his inner turmoil. Not just passive faith in his goodness, Luke's greatest strength became his teaching, philosophy's fatal flaw. Number 4. The Temple's fatal flaw. By the time Luke established his Jedi training temple, he'd spent years searching for Force-sensitive individuals and ancient Jedi lore The Rise of Skywalker, the visual dictionary, confirms he'd even located the original Jedi texts from the first temple on Ahch-To. But Luke made a critical architectural decision that would doom his academy. He tried to recreate the old Republic's Jedi Order without understanding why it had collapsed. The Clone Wars-era Jedi took children from their families, trained them in isolation, and taught emotional suppression as a virtue. This system produced rigid thinkers who couldn't adapt when Palpatine corrupted the Republic from within. Luke, having never witnessed these systemic failures firsthand, repeated their mistakes with his own students. He separated Force-sensitive children from their support systems, created a hierarchical structure that discouraged questioning, and most critically, he became the sole authority on all matters Jedi. Luke could have built something entirely new, a Jedi Order where students maintained connections with their families, learning that attachment strengthens rather than weakens. He could have established a council of masters rather than centralizing all authority in himself. Most importantly, he could have encouraged his students to question Jedi doctrine, to learn from the Order's failures rather than mindlessly reproducing its structure. Instead, when Ben Solo began asking difficult questions about his grandfather, Luke had no framework for that conversation because he'd never questioned the system himself. Number 5. The moment everything changed. The scene in Ben Solo's hut represents the fulcrum point where Luke's incomplete training crystallized into catastrophic failure. For one brief moment, Luke Skywalker ignited his lightsaber over his sleeping nephew because he glimpsed the future. Death, destruction, the end of everything he loved. The Last Jedi shows us this moment from multiple perspectives, but the canonical truth remains the same. Luke let fear override wisdom, instinct override training, and that momentary lapse destroyed everything. Here's what makes this failure so tragic. Luke had been tested by visions of darkness before. On Dagobah, he entered the cave and faced a vision of himself becoming Vader. On the Death Star, Palpatine showed him his friends dying, trying to provoke him into striking in anger. Luke had intellectually understood that fear leads to anger. Anger leads to hate, and hate leads to suffering. But intellectual knowledge without emotional integration is useless when confronted with genuine terror. Proper training in recognizing and managing fear responses would have given Luke the tools to pause, breathe, and remember that the future is always in motion. He could have confronted Ben the next morning with compassion instead of terror. He could have become the master Ben needed, rather than the threat that drove him into Snoke's arms. Had Luke found Ahsoka Tano, who left the Jedi Order without abandoning the light, he might have learned different perspectives on managing darkness within oneself and others. Number 6. The Exiles Error. After Ben's fall and the destruction of his temple, Luke Skywalker made perhaps his most devastating choice. He decided the galaxy would be better off without the Jedi. He traveled to Ahch-To, the site of the first Jedi Temple, intending to die there and let the Jedi Order end with him. The Last Jedi shows us a man so broken by his failure that he'd rather let darkness reign unopposed than risk making another mistake. This despair represents the antithesis of everything the Force teaches about balance and renewal. Luke's self-imposed exile cut him off from the Force itself, according to the film's novelization. He didn't just physically isolate himself. He severed his connection to the cosmic energy field that binds the galaxy together. This is like a doctor who makes a medical error, deciding that medicine itself is the problem and burning down every hospital. Luke's personal failure became a universal condemnation of the Jedi tradition, and the galaxy paid the price as the First Order rose unchallenged. Had Luke stayed to fight, recognizing that one mistake doesn't invalidate an entire philosophy, everything changes. He could have tracked down Ben and attempted redemption earlier, when the darkness hadn't fully consumed him. He could have trained Rey himself from the moment she touched his lightsaber on Takodana, giving her years of preparation instead of days. He could have stood alongside Leia as the Resistance formed, providing both strategic wisdom and tactical Force abilities. Most critically, he could have learned from his failure and built a better Jedi Order, one that acknowledged darkness, processed trauma, and taught emotional resilience alongside Force techniques. Number 7. The legacy of loss. Even during his exile, Luke's presence was felt across the galaxy. Han and Leia's marriage crumbled under the weight of Ben's fall and Luke's disappearance. Rey grew up as a scavenger on Jakku, her Force abilities emerging with no guidance, making her vulnerable to manipulation. The Resistance fought desperately against the First Order without their most powerful ally. According to the Rise of Kylo Ren comics, even the Knights of Ren emerged in part because of the power vacuum Luke's absence created. The ripple effects demonstrate how interconnected the Force truly is. When Luke cut himself off, he didn't just remove one Jedi from play, he removed hope itself. People throughout the galaxy told stories of Luke Skywalker's legendary exploits, And those stories inspired resistance against tyranny. His absence sent a message. Even heroes give up. Even legends break. Even the most powerful Force user in the galaxy thought we weren't worth fighting for. This psychological impact was arguably more damaging than the tactical loss of his abilities. Picture the alternative. A Luke Skywalker who owned his failure but continued fighting, who appeared on worlds threatened by the First Order and reminded people that making mistakes doesn't mean abandoning your principles, who trained a new generation of Jedi not in isolation but integrated into their communities, who showed Rey and Finn and Poe that heroism isn't about never falling, it's about standing back up. This Luke could have faced Kylo Ren multiple times, each confrontation an opportunity for redemption, rather than a final battle born of desperation. Number 8. The final lesson. Luke's last act, projecting himself across the galaxy to face down the First Order on Crate, represents both the culmination of his journey and a glimpse of what could have been. In that moment, he finally achieved the lesson Yoda tried to teach him in the cave, that a Jedi uses the Force for knowledge and defense, never for attack. He saved the Resistance without harming anyone, passed on hope to a new generation, and confronted Ben Solo with compassion rather than fear. And then he died, having learned his most important lesson just in time to never teach it. The tragedy isn't just that Luke failed as a Jedi Master. It's that he spent decades failing to learn from his failures. He made a mistake with Ben and responded by abandoning everyone. He saw the Jedi texts as sacred but never absorbed their deeper wisdom. He understood the mechanics of the Force but not the psychology of using it responsibly. It took Rey calling him out, Yoda destroying his precious texts, and the galaxy burning for Luke to finally embrace the most important teaching. We are what they grow beyond. Had Luke understood this earlier, that being a Jedi Master means accepting that your students will exceed you, fail differently than you, and forge their own paths, everything changes. He could have known from the beginning that the goal isn't preventing all darkness, but teaching people how to face their darkness and choose the light anyway. His abbreviated training, while incomplete, gave him a unique perspective. He understood both the power of attachment and the necessity of letting go. Luke Skywalker could have revolutionized the Jedi Order, creating something that learned from 10,000 years of mistakes. Instead, he repeated those mistakes until it was almost too late. We've explored how Luke's journey was shaped by missed opportunities and incomplete wisdom. If this analysis resonated with you, smash that hype button and help other fans discover these deeper Star Wars conversations. May the Force be with you, always.